Call us up to where you are. The one who sits on the throne. The one who sits on the throne. Encircled by rainbows, a light has a jewel. The elders surround you on 24 thrones, dressed in white robes, crowned with gold. The elders surround you on 24 thrones. You're encircled by rainbows, a light has a jewel. The elders surround you on 24 thrones, dressed in white robes, crowned with gold. The elders surround you on 24 thrones, encircled by rainbows, a light has a jewel. The elders surround you on 24 thrones, dressed in white robes, crowned with gold. The elders surround you on 24 thrones.
Flashes of lightning,
Oh Lord, we adore you.
peals of thunder,
We bow down before you.
flashes of lightning,
Oh Lord, we adore you.
peals of thunder,
We bow down before you.
flashes of lightning,
Oh Lord, we adore you.
peals of thunder,
We bow down before you.
flashes of lightning,
Oh Lord, we adore you.
peals of thunder.
We bow down before you.
To the one who lives forever and ever, worthy are you, the only one worthy, for you alone created the cosmos, received all the glory and honor and power. To the one who lives forever and ever, worthy are you, the only one worthy, for you alone created the cosmos, received all the glory and honor and power, as you once created. Now make us anew.
Oh, on this new month that starts tonight, Lord, do a new thing. Fill us with radiance and brightness. Chase the darkness away. Wash us in your spirit. Cleanse us in your love.
Welcome to Beit Shalom. Welcome to the coming of Shabbat. It is a wonderful thing to celebrate with you this evening, and we are thrilled to be here. And as in ancient times, as in the times of David, and as in the times from that time forward, there was an understanding that when you went to God's presence, whether it was in Jerusalem or wherever you went to worship, you always went up to be with him. So let us go up to God's dwelling place with Psalm 132. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let us go up to your dwelling place. Let us worship at your feet. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and the ark of your strength. For I will not enter my house or be found upon my bed. I will not let my eyes see sleep until Adonai dwells in Israel. Let us go up to your dwelling place. Let us worship at your feet. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and the ark of your strength. For the sake of your servant David, don't turn away Messiah's face. The truth Adonai has sworn. David's son shall reign forever. Let us go up to your dwelling place. Let us worship at your feet. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and the ark of your strength. May our sons keep your covenant, learning all you will teach. Let your priests speak clothed in righteousness, as the pious ones sing for joy. Let us go up to your dwelling place. Let us worship at your feet. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and the ark of your strength. For our God has chosen Zion. He selected this as his dwelling place. God will rest here forever, bringing us his salvation. Let us go up to your dwelling place. Let us worship at your feet. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and the ark of your strength. David's horn will emerge. Messiah's lamp will light the darkness, for his enemies will see shame. But his crown will shine forever. Let us go up to your dwelling place. Let us worship at your feet. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and the ark of your strength. Let us go up to your dwelling place. Let us worship at your feet. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and the ark of your strength. Let us build the temple, not by might nor power, but by the Spirit. Let us rise from our oppressors and present to him our hearts. You are the Lord, you are holy, O Lord. You dwell in the praises of Israel. We bring you our songs and our praise, and all that comes to you, you shall save. You are the Lord most holy, who brought us out of the house of bondage. We have come out of Egypt to bless Jerusalem. We present ourselves as sons of liberty. Come, let us build the temple. Nivne Beit HaMikdash, Nivne Beit HaMikdash, Lobakaya, Lobakoa, Ella Rakbarua, Nivne Beit Hamikdash, Nivne Beit Hamikdash, Nivne Beit Hamikdash. Ulu Mitzarenu, Nagish Lo Et Libenu, Kinvne Beit Hamikdash. Ata Adonai Ata Kadosh, Sheoshev Tehilot Yisrael. Navi Eka Echerenu, Leheka Hilatenu, Ula Ele Habaim Ata Goel. Nivne Beit Hamikdash, Nivne Beit Hamikdash. Lobakaya, Lobakoa, Ella Rakbarua, Nivne Beit Hamikdash, Nivne Beit Hamikdash, Nivne Beit Hamikdash.
Lobakaya, Lobakoa, Ella Rakbarua, Nivne Beit Hamikdash.
Not the same on both sheets. Adonai Kadosh, Shehotianu Beit Avadim, Yatsanu Mitzrayim, Levaret Yerushalayim, Ritzion Na'aleh Livnei Korim, Livnei Beit Hamikdash, Livnei Beit Hamikdash. Lobakaya, Lobakoa, Ella Rakbarua, Livnei Beit Hamikdash, Livnei Beit Hamikdash, Livnei Beit Hamikdash. Lobakaya, Lobakoa, Ella Rakbarua, Livnei Beit Hamikdash.
That my people would listen to me, that you would walk in my ways, then I would subdue your enemies and fill you with love.
Sing aloud to God our strength, shout for joy to the God of Yaakov. Sing a song on our holy day, for this is the word of the Lord. I remove the burden from your neck, I have freed your hands. You called in distress, I delivered you, I answered you from the storm. Sing aloud to God our strength, shout for joy to the God of Yaakov. Sing a song on our holy day, for this is the word of the Lord. Hear me, my people, I admonish you. Listen to my voice. There shall be no strange gods among you. I am the Lord your God. Sing aloud to God our strength, shout for joy to the God of Yaakov. Sing a song on our holy day, for this is the word of the Lord. Sing aloud to God our strength, shout for joy to the God of Yaakov. Sing a song on our holy day, for this is the word of the Lord. For this is the word of the Lord. For this is the word of the Lord. There is a sense in Scripture of an apocalyptic future. And honestly, there's a lot of people who are biblical people of faith who look at the apocalyptic future and they treat it like a cheap horror film, and they use it to scare people who they can talk to. But as much as God talks about how there will be difficulty that will be like birth pains, giving forth a new and a greater and a more wonderful future, he is also very, very clear about the fact that you must not harm what belongs to him. And no matter what difficulty or what adversity comes along, he is committed to protecting what is his own through whatever comes. And so the promise in Revelation chapter 6 is that with the things that open up across human history, that his promise is that that which belongs to him, he is going to protect. I looked on as the Lamb was breaking the first of the seals. One of the living creatures called in a voice like thunder,
Come forth.
Suddenly before my eyes there was a white horse, the man on it holding a bow. They handed him a crown and he went on his way, a conqueror intent upon conquest. But the olive orchard and the vine, you must not harm them in any way, for they are joined to me. Their fruit is precious to me. It is fruit that will last forever. I looked on as the Lamb was breaking the second of the seals. The second of the living creatures called in a voice like thunder, come forth. There appeared another horse as red as a flame, the man on it given the right to take peace from the earth and release a great slaughter, a sword of great size in his hand. But the olive orchard and the vine, you must not harm them in any way, for they are joined To me their fruit is precious. To me it is fruit that will last forever. I looked on as the Lamb was breaking the third of the seals. The third of the living creatures called in a voice like thunder, "Come forth." Suddenly before my eyes there was a black horse, the man on it holding a scan. I heard what sounded like a voice say, "A day's wages for bread, a day's wages for a small bit of food." But the olive orchard and the vine, you must not harm them in any way, for they are joined to me. Their fruit is precious. To me it is fruit that will last forever. I looked on as the Lamb was breaking the fourth of the seals. Let's declare the Shema together. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vayed. And you shall love the Lord with all your heart, and you shall love the Lord with all your soul. After Yeshua had come down from the hill, do that once more time. So take two. After Yeshua had come down from the hill, large crowds followed him. Then a man afflicted with Saraot kneeled down in front of him and said, "Sir, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Yeshua reached out his hand, touched him, and said, "I am willing, be cleansed." At once he was cleansed from his Saraot. Then Yeshua said to him, "See that you tell no one, but as a testimony to the people, go and let the Cohen examine you and offer the sacrifice that Moshe commanded." Saraat is commonly known, or it was called when Scripture was translated into English in the 15 and 1600s, it was called leprosy. And it was a skin disease that is described in significant and specific detail in Torah. And there is a routine that is set out in Leviticus chapter 13 for dealing with the outbreak of skin disease. Now, what is called Saraat and what was believed to be the skin disease that they faced in Israel in ancient times is not the same thing as what is called leprosy today. And so on a certain level, I don't want to tell you that it's leprosy, because if you look up leprosy and if you look it up in Wikipedia and online, you will find a very different disease than what is here. But what we have here is we have Yeshua breaking into history, and in the midst of his ministry, there is the healing of highly contagious, highly communicable, highly dangerous skin disease. And we are in worldwide pandemic at the moment. We are dealing with a disease that is highly contagious and that is poorly understood as medicine typically understands things. And I looked at this and I didn't go looking for talking to you about infectious skin disease, but rather the Torah portion brought us here tonight. And so this is Leviticus chapter 13 as part of tonight's Torah portion. And if you wanted to preach out of Leviticus 14, you would also be preaching about infectious skin disease as well. So I looked at this and went, well, I may never again have as much audience, have such interest in infectious disease as we do in 2020. So let's take a look at this. Before I launch into Torah and read to you a portion of tonight's Torah portion, one of the things that I am going to do with this, one of the things that's significant and important about the personality of Yeshua, the Messiah, is that he's not going looking for this. Instead, there are people who have faith and who have trust and who have a belief that he is capable of dealing with horrific disease that there is no medical cure for. And so there's a couple things that I want to point out here about who Yeshua is and how he relates to all of this first, before we end up taking a look at the background and the backstory. Yeshua has a crowd following him. There's a man afflicted with Saraat, and this infectious skin disease that is described in Torah, he comes, kneels down in front of Yeshua and says, "Sir, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Yeshua reached out his hand, touched him, and said, "I am willing, be cleansed." And at once he was cleansed from his infectious skin disease. Then Yeshua said to him, "See that you tell no one, but as a testimony to the people, let the Kohen examine you and offer the sacrifice that Moshe commanded." Now, Yeshua handled things very differently than the way that people handle them today. One of the things that happens today is if God does something wonderful for people, the hope is that we can use this and we can leverage this into creating a crowd out of this, and that we can grow something based on something extraordinary that God has done. Yeshua, and this is recorded in Matthew, but it also ends up being recorded in the Gospel of Mark multiple times, to the point where this is called the gospel secret. And what ends up happening is Yeshua repeatedly says to people who are healed, "Don't tell anyone." And I don't know if Yeshua was relying on the perversity of human nature and the fact that people are just ornery and contrary, and that if you tell them not to do something, they'll definitely do it, or if Yeshua was really trying to extend his ministry. Because the more it became known that he was doing things that only the Messiah could do, the more I believe it was going to foreshorten and cut short his ability to minister. Because Yeshua was on a collision course with the religious authorities in Jerusalem, because he did not recognize their authority. And, you know, they were only going to recognize a Messiah who was going to play patty cake with them. And Yeshua did not tolerate sin and corruption from those who were called to be righteous. And the religious authorities were not the religious authorities who should have been ruling at the temple. Indeed, what it looks like is Yochanan the Immerser, commonly called John the Baptist, his father was from a family of Kohens. But the Kohens were not the people who were the high priests in that generation, in that time. And what had happened with the high priestly office was the high priestly office had essentially been purchased. And Rome had said, we can have Jewish high priests, but the Jewish high priests have to be the highest bidder. So who can extract the most amount of tax dollars out of this temple and pay us? And the answer was, you give us what you have said you would come up with, and we will let you be high priests until we decide we want more money, and then we'll put it up for auction again. And so there was an indeterminate period of time where the high priest had to come up with the money that they had promised Rome they would come up with, and then they had to end up actually funding the temple in addition to the extortion that was going to Rome. There was a reason that Rome was not a beloved empire in terms of this. They got money out of the Middle East and out of Israel, not unlike some people seem to be almost capable of getting blood out of a stone. But it was that sort of extraction that was going on here. And so what you have here is Yeshua is actually doing his ministry, and the ministry that he's doing, he's not seeking to curry favor with authorities. He's not seeking to confront authorities. He is seeking to do ministry that he needs to do to fulfill God's purpose and to do what his messianic call and his messianic task is. So, you know, I find that instructive for us today, because really Some people want to end up taking what God is doing and use it to curry favor with others that they perceive as being powerful or important. This was not Yeshua's way. It was not his purpose. It wasn't his interest. And so, if there are things that God has called us to do, here's what we need to be. We need to be a people who are doing what God is up to. Full stop. You can't use what God has given you to do as a way and a means to create wealth, because that's corrupting, and that's what those did who had taken the office of priest, which was not theirs to take, but had used it as a point to buy off the Romans. And I'm sure that there was a belief that the end justified the means, and if they gave the Romans so much money, they'd be left alone and they'd be able to worship. But there was a corruption and a deal with the devil that was at the center of this. So, the man with highly contagious, highly dangerous skin disease finds Yeshua, gets his attention. He has heard about Messiah. And he says, if you want to, you could cleanse me. And the person with the skin disease is convinced that the power is already available with Yeshua and in Yeshua, such that the power is available to set him free from his torment and from his agony. Now, we'll read about the background in terms of what happened, but I'll give you the cliff notes at this point in time. The skin disease had circumstances to it that involved inspection, that involved quarantine, that would involve additional inspection, and I'll read to you the technical details on this. But essentially what ended up happening was, if it was determined that there was infectious skin disease that any member of Israel had, what ended up happening was they were not allowed to be with the rest of society. And the stay-at-home order that has become familiar to many in the United States of America, that was the order that someone who had infectious skin disease had, that they were to be separate and apart from the rest of the society. And indeed, there were those who ended up coming, and if they were walking and if they were out, they had to end up letting people know that they were unclean, so others could end up creating a 6-foot or greater bubble around them, such that they would end up not being infectious to the rest of the society. And in Leviticus chapters 13 and 14, it tells you about who has the authority to recognize this. It tells you about what the details are of the infectious skin disease. It tells you about all the rest of this. What it doesn't tell you is how to get rid of the infectious skin disease. And so whether this was something that burned out after a period of time, or whether this is something that a person would live with for their entire lives, not entirely sure, but it's probably one of those two options, honestly. So you have this person who says to Yeshua, you, if you want to, can make me clean. And one of the things that we find about Yeshua is that he is constantly moved to care. He's moved to care. He's moved to compassion over his people. The suffering of the human situation ends up having a profound impact on who Yeshua is. And the answer is, I am willing. Be cleaned. Be clean. Be cleansed. Be rid of this. And at once he was cleansed from his infectious skin disease. Then Yeshua said to him, see that you tell no one, but as a testimony to the people, go and let the Kohen examine you and offer the sacrifice that Moshe commanded. When there ends up being a conflict between Yeshua and the authorities at the temple in Jerusalem, did they have the evidence that he was doing the things that a messianic figure would do? They did. This man would end up going to the temple in Jerusalem. He would end up bringing sacrifice to the temple in Jerusalem. He would say to them, I am the man with infectious skin disease that you took a look at me and deemed me to be unclean. Now I am submitting myself, declared clean. So the one who had been ravaged with infectious skin disease was going to stand before those in the temple who were inspecting and get signed off on. Now, I don't know about you, but I would guess that this was a pretty remarkable event. And the question ends up being asked of this man who had been overtaken by infectious skin disease. How is it that you were overtaken with infectious skin disease and now you're utterly and absolutely clean? And I would guess that the man who had been overtaken by this would end up saying, Yeshua of Nazareth. I accosted him on the road and said if he wanted to do something about it, he could. And he said he wanted to do something about it. And here I am. One of the things that I really believe is that very few people get through life without getting evidence of how extraordinary God is, and of who he is, and of how he rescues. But here's the backstory in terms of what Moshe wrote about dealing with horrific infectious skin disease. Adonai said to Moshe and Aharon, if someone develops on his skin a swelling, scab, or bright spot, which could develop into the disease tzera'at, again, an infectious skin disease, he is to be brought to Aharon the Kohen or one of his sons who are Kohanim. The Kohen is to examine the sore on his skin. If the hair in the sore has turned white and the sore appears to go deep into the skin, it's tzera'at. And after examining him, the Kohen is to declare him unclean. If the bright spot is on his skin is white, but it does not appear to go deep into the skin and the hair has not turned white, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine him again, and if the sore appears the same as before and has not spread on the skin, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 more days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine him again, and if the sore has faded and hasn't spread on the skin, then the Kohen is to declare him clean. It is only a scab, as he is to wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab spreads further on the skin after he has been examined by the Kohen and declared clean, he is to let himself be examined yet again by the Kohen. The Kohen will examine him, and if he sees that the scab has spread on his skin, then the Kohen will declare him unclean. It's tzera'at. If a person has tzera'at, he is to be brought to the Kohen. The Kohen is to examine him, and if he sees that there is a white swelling in the skin, which has turned the hair white and inflamed flesh in the swelling, then it is chronic, tseraat on his skin, and the Kohen is to declare him unclean. He is not to isolate him because it is already clear that he is unclean. If the tseraat breaks out all over the skin, so that as far as the Kohen can see, the person with tseraat has sores everywhere on his body from his head to his feet, then the Kohen is to examine him, and if he sees that the tseraat has covered the entire body, he is to pronounce the person with sores clean. It is all turned white, and he is clean. But if one day inflamed flesh appears on him, he will be unclean. The Kohen will examine the inflamed flesh and declare him unclean. The inflamed flesh is unclean. It's tseraat. However, if the inflamed flesh again turns white, he is to come to the Kohen. The Kohen will examine him, and if he sees that the sores have turned white, then the Kohen is to declare clean the person with the sores. He is clean. He is to examine it. If he sees that it appears to be more than skin deep and it has hair that has turned white, then the Kohen is to pronounce him unclean. The disease of tseraat has broken out in the boil. But if the Kohen looks at it and it doesn't see any white hairs in it, and it isn't more than skin deep but appears faded, the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. If it spreads on the skin, the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is the disease. But if the bright spot stays where it was and has not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the Kohen is to declare him clean. Or if someone has on his skin a burn caused by fire, and the inflamed flesh where it was burned has become a bright spot, reddish white or white, then the Kohen is to examine it. And if he sees that the hair in the bright spot has turned white and that it appears to be deeper than the skin around it, it's tseraat. It has broken out in the burn, and the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is a sore from tseraat. But if the Kohen examines it and sees no white hair in the bright spot and it is no more than skin deep but looks faded, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine him. If it is spread on the skin, then the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is a sore from tseraat. But if the bright spot stays where it was and has not spread on the skin but appears faded, it is a swelling due to the burn, and the Kohen is to declare him clean, because it is only a scar from the burn. If a man or woman has a sore on the head or a man in his beard, then the Kohen is to examine the sore. If he sees that it appears to be deeper than the skin around it, with yellow thin hair in it, then the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is a crusted area, a tseraat, of the head or beard. If the Kohen examines the diseased crusted area and sees that it appears not to be deeper than the skin around it and without any black hair in it, then the Kohen is to isolate for 7 days the person with the diseased crusted area. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine the sore, and if he sees the crusted area hasn't spread, that it has no yellow hair in it, and the crusted area is not deeper than the skin around it, then the person is to be shaved except for the crusted area itself, and the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 more days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine the crusted area, and if he sees the crusted area has not spread on the skin and does not appear to be deeper than the skin around it, the Kohen is to declare him clean. He is to wash his clothes and be clean. But if the crusted area spreads after his purification, then the Kohen is to examine him, and if he sees that the crusted area has spread on the skin, the Kohen is not to look for yellow hair. He is unclean. But if the crusted area's appearance doesn't change and black hair grows up in it, then the crusted area is healed. He is clean, and the Kohen is to declare him clean. There's a couple things that are going on here, and I have read from multiple strophes of this, and so you can get a sense that while there are areas of infectious skin disease that can come from burns, There are areas that can be under the hairline. There are areas that are manifest in different ways. Here is the process and the procedure again and again. What is supposed to happen with the person who is in question is the authority is not left to that person for them to figure out what's good or bad about themselves. There is a specific authority that they are to go to that is the authority that deals with this and sees this on a regular basis. And in the ancient Jewish world, it was the priests at the tabernacle or the temple who were responsible for seeing this, for recognizing this, and being aware of the scripture that describes if it does this, it is. If it does that, it's not. And so on a regular basis, what ended up happening was there were problems and there were difficulties. The current pandemic that we're facing, the great difficulty with this is it appears to be highly infectious for up to 2 weeks before a person is symptomatic. And there is a certain amount of the population that will be asymptomatic and will not even know that they're sick in terms of this. One of the, dare I call it, advantages of the disease of the ancient world that Moses and Aaron and Aaron's descendants would deal with is that they knew when they had a problem. And the issue and the difficulty in the day that we have right now is there is real question as to who has a problem and who doesn't have a problem. And one of the things, as many of us are in a position where we are to wear kerchiefs or face masks or other sorts of things that block our face at this point in time, you read about this, and there are portions in Leviticus 13 and 14 where it says the upper lip needs to be covered. And so I'm looking at modern medical advice from surgeon generals, from infectious disease experts, and from other people who are involved with this at this point in time, and they are coming up with the exact same advice that Leviticus chapter 13 and Leviticus chapter 14 came up with. And in a society where you do not know where someone is sick or not sick, and where you can't tell, and where they may be asymptomatic but still contagious, we're dealing with much of the society, minimal contact with the rest of society. And we're doing that at this point in time. There are some who are going to look at what we are going through right now and going to go, science or technology will save us. I'm not convinced that's the case. And I have spoken previously about the link in terms of this particular pandemic to human contact with animals that Leviticus chapter 11 forbids us to have contact with. And so I'm not going to beat a horse, whether it's dead or suffering, okay? So no beating a dead horse at this point in time. But in terms of this, we have a circumstance around us at this point in time which is difficult. We have a circumstance where the question is, for the body of Messiah, who rescues from pandemic? And as we are asking who is rescuing from pandemic, I am not adverse to technology, okay? I am Mr. Gadget guy, okay? I love audio equipment, I love video equipment, I love computers. I mean, there's all sorts of toys that I have had contact with, and that God has been gracious enough to make a small portion of what's available I've got access to. So in terms of this, I don't have any distress or any difficulty over people seeking a technological cure. But I really think that as part of the body of Messiah, first and foremost, the question for those of us who walk with Yeshua is this: do we believe that in encountering Yeshua, if we see him, do we believe, like the man who had infectious skin disease, he accosts Yeshua, he stops Yeshua, he gets in a place where he has to be dealt with and says, if you wanted to, you could heal me? Is the body of Messiah in a place where we're watching what's going on with the pandemic and saying to God, if you want to, you can heal us? And I don't think that it's a binary situation where you either encounter Yeshua, you pray and you seek him and say, if you want to, you can heal us. I think that you can say that while still being careful of what's going on around us at this point in time. But in terms of this, there are those who believe that an expression of faith essentially comes through cavalier behavior or attitude. And I think that we have to be careful, because the question is, has God said? Has God spoken? And simply because we want God to speak, or we want God to engage us, or we want God to be involved in our pain and our suffering, the guy with infectious skin disease didn't go, oh, well, you know, I'm not really contagious because God's out there, okay? Instead, he encountered Messiah, and he had the challenge with Messiah, which was, if you want to, you can rescue me. And it was Yeshua saying, I am willing, be cleansed. And that was the point where he was set free. And I believe that we're in a society at this point in time where we need to be cleansed. I believe that we're in a society where our need to be cleansed from the current pandemic is only a small portion of what we need to be cleansed from. I believe that we need to be cleansed from being casual and cavalier. I think we need to be cleansed from being so much like the unregenerate society around us that it's hard to tell us from them. I think that there's a variety of things that we need to be cleansed from. I think there's certain things about our appetites and what we live our lives for that are not based on who God is, but which are based on what everybody else around us wants. And you know, one of the things about being a believer is I don't believe that being aware of media and culture is a bad thing necessarily, but I believe that it is possible for us to get sucked into the same value system as the people who are making our media and making our culture. And I really think that it's important for us to stand and understand that we are a people that need to be cleansed, need to be purified. But it might be the price for our cleansing and our purification that God says, come out of Babylon. Come be my people. Come live with me. And so my hope is that God is taking care of each and every one of you. My hope is that you are safe and that you are secure. My hope is that in the midst of that which has been pulled away from your life, that there is opportunity for new things to grow, and that you will give yourself to Messiah because he wants to build new things in us. He wants to take and make space and time for us. And on a certain level, what's happened with this pandemic is that for a certain part of our population, we are in a position where the things that we have used to entertain ourselves, to occupy ourselves, and to distract ourselves are no longer available to us. And some of the things that have been pulled out of our lives that have not been called essential services, we're looking at it going, well, that seems pretty essential to me. We need, as a society, to be healed from the pandemic that is moving through. We are given a choice at this point in time as the body of Messiah. And the question is, do we turn to Messiah and do we turn to God and say, if you want, you can heal us. You can make us clean. You can take us out of this suffering. Or are we a people who are like the secularists around us who are going, the Mayo Clinic or Johns Hopkins or Merck Pharmaceutical or Ciba Pharmaceutical or Teva or some other organization that is brilliant in terms of medical things will end up coming up with our salvation? Because you can't have it both ways. God has set before us a test so we can kind of figure out who we are and what we really trust in. And in the book of Matthew, a man came up to Yeshua and said, if you want to, you can heal me. And I think that it's fair for the body of Messiah to be in prayer before God and in a place where we say, if you want to, Lord, you can rescue us. You can do something extraordinary. You can do something wonderful. And this is where our hope is. In the meantime, a lot of what we really don't like and a lot of what we're really not enjoying at the moment in terms of care to try and take care of society is actually pulled out of Leviticus chapter 12, 13, and 14. And I have only taken a look at a small portion of this, but there is an attempt to, however imperfectly, try and take care of society at this point in time. And I hope that this does not chafe at the hearts of the people of Messiah too horrifically. I hope that this will be something that God uses to draw us close to himself. And I got to tell you that in the day in which there is different instruction and where we can be together again in a room is a day that I am so looking forward to. Amen.
wonders, your plans for us. You have no equal.
How much have you done, Yahweh, my God? Your wonders, your plans for us, you have no equal. I will proclaim and speak of them. They are without number, poor and needy as I am. The Lord has me in mind, you my helper.
You always help me, Lord.
My Savior,
You come to rescue me,
my God, do not delay. How much have you done, Yahweh, my God? Your wonders, your plans for us, you have no equal. I will proclaim and speak of them. They are without number, poor and needy as I am. The Lord has me in mind, you my helper.
Alone can help me, Lord.
My Savior,
My Redeemer,
my God, do not delay. You my helper,
you reach out to us, Lord.
my Savior,
And you will rescue us, my God.
do not delay. You my helper,
You will help us, Lord.
my
You
Savior,
have a plan for us, my God. Do not delay.
Michamocha Belim Adonai, Michamocha Nedar Bakodesh, Nora Tehilot, oh say Fele, oh say Fele, Mikamoka B'lim Adonai Mi chamoka nedar b'kodesh Nora tehilot Oh, say, farewell. Oh, say, farewell. Who is like thee, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like thee, glorified in holiness? You are awesome in praise, working wonders, O Lord. Who is like thee, O Lord? Who is like thee, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like thee, glorified in holiness? You are awesome in praise, working wonders, O Lord. Who is like thee, O Lord? Mikamoka B'lim Adonai Mikamoka Nedar B'kodesh Nora tehilot Oh, say farewell. Oh, say farewell. You are awesome in praise, working wonders, O Lord. Who is like thee, O Lord? Nora tehilot Oh, say farewell. Oh, say farewell. Oh, say May the God who takes as his title Redeemer and Savior and Healer be present and active in our community. May the one who created us, who knows us, who understands all there is to know about us, may he be the one who holds your life as an individual and our life as the body of Messiah in his hand. May he be the one who gave instruction in ancient times in how to keep his people from being wiped out and exterminated. May he be the one who in the days that we live in provides mercy, grace, healing, and protection to those who look to him. And may we be a people who look once again to Messiah and say, if you desire for me to be clean, I will be clean. And may we not stop with the desire to be clean simply at a point of the protection of our own individual health, but may this be a desire to be cleansed and purified on all the levels that matters to our Lord and our King. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom.